The Holy Gospel according to John, the 13th chapter. When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of the human being has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in God's own self and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." The Gospel of the Lord. So I grew up a Lego kid. Any other Lego kids in the house? For realsies, I love Legos. If you come to my house, it's embarrassing how many Legos I still have in my house. We loved Legos. And when I was a kid, I was the kind of kid that I would get a set and I would build it once and then I'd throw it away and I'd build whatever I wanted to after that. And I would just build something new and I'd watch TV and build whatever I saw on TV. I had Kit. I built Kit. Knight Rider 2000. Remember that? Knight Industries 2000. I loved Legos. And one day I had this huge table in my bedroom. I think it was a barn door or something like that. It was just this huge door. And what I decided to do is I wanted to build a giant space base. So I took all these plates, they called them big plates that you put down and you put them all over the table. And so I filled up my whole, this giant barn door, this huge city that I made and so I had places for the spaceships to land and I had places for the people to eat and kitchens. I made little bathrooms and little bedrooms with beds and I was really invested and I worked for this, in my mind for days. It was probably 20 minutes, but for me, it was forever and ever and I loved this thing. But I also had a little sister who was curious about things. And one day when I was not paying attention, she had come into my room and she found my space base. And I think she found it as interesting as I did. Because when I came in later, it didn't quite look like what I had left it. Things were sort of taken apart and fallen down, and there was a Barbie in the middle. I don't remember Barbie in space. I felt like in the moment, you had ruined my great creation. Why did you do this to me? And I was so upset with her. And she felt that. And so, do you remember there used to be these little things? It was a sticker and you would punch letters into the sticker. She felt so bad that when I came out of my room later, she had punched a little message and put it up on my door that said, "I'm sorry, Jay," on it. So then I felt bad. Went to her and asked if she wanted to play Legos with me. And together we came back together and played Legos and maybe put things together and maybe even gave Barbie a spot in the Legos. I don't know, but I like this story because it makes me think about this story in our texts today, this kind of evolution of things that are about creation and recreation and restoring and things like that. The story in particular though I want to focus on is Revelation. Did you hear the Revelation text today? I know that typically when we hear the word Revelation, we go, "Oh Lord, here it comes." Big wings and beasts and feast and famine and murder, death, and it's all weird and it's all kind of creepy and you're kind of like, "I'll just read that another time," But today's text is this beautiful vision of a new heaven and a new earth. It's this idea, what I'm going to say is like a story that tells us something about God's own heart, a truth about life and God. I use this word, and I use it carefully. It's the word myth. The word myth. We typically hear the word myth and we think lies. But myths are stories that are there to tell us a truth about something. They're there to inform something about us, to tell us something about the world and the way we live in. For instance, the tortoise and the hare. I don't mean to blow y'all's mind, but there wasn't a real tortoise and there wasn't a real hare having a real race. But I know, I had a lady last night when I was leaving, she was like, "Can't believe there was no real, you ruined my life." I mean, being funny, being facetious. But we all know the story of a tortoise and the hare because the moral of the story is what? Slow and steady wins the race. It tells us a truth. It's teaching us something real. So just because something wasn't historical doesn't mean it's not true and telling us something that's true. So the first myth, the first story about truth I want to share is the story that goes all the way back to Genesis. And the beginning of the story, it says that God's Spirit hovered over the oceans, hovered over the deep, it says. And the deep in Hebrew tradition meant chaos and trouble and pain and despair. And God's Spirit hovered over it. And God speaks into the chaos and says, let there be light. And light springs out of chaos. And God goes, ooh, that's good. And God says, what else? And then God says, well, maybe let's also make darkness and light. And God sees the darkness and the light and says, oh, that's good too. And God continues to make sun and moon and seas and land. And God makes all of these things, plants and animals and birds in the air and fish in the sea and beasts of every kind. And God's like, oh, this is so good. And then comes to saying, let's make humanity. And let's make humanity, and it says in the image of God, but the idea of image doesn't mean directly like in a mirror or a picture of an image. The idea is the spirit in image, the idea of that, the personhood in that. I want something that looks like me so that when they see this person, they'll see me, they'll see who I am. That the word in Hebrew is the same word they use for the thumbprints that end up in the potter's clay, that personalize that potter, the impression, that beingness. And so God takes the clay, gathers it together, and it says God breathes God's nephesh into the human being. And God makes Adam, which is Hebrew for earth. It's not a name. It wasn't like, and I made a guy named Adam. No, it said God made earthlings. And God saw this earthling and said, oh, that's really good. But then came the first thing that God said was not good. What was the very first thing that God spoke and said, well, that's not good? What is it? What's that? Not good. It's not good that the human being is alone. So the very first thing that God recognizes not good in the creation is isolation. And so God created humanity to live together in relationships, to do love together, to be people who would live out the reign of God in how they lived and worked and functioned as humans being working together. And so there was this beautiful image of this garden where all things were going right. And then came this figurative serpent, the nagging voice in the back of our heads, the one that bites our ankles when we're not looking. And the serpent says, God told you not to eat of the fruit of the tree of good and evil in the center of the garden. Now, I just want what was the fruit? What do we all think the fruit of the tree in the garden? An apple. It wasn't an apple, y'all. Do you know why it was an apple? Because all the Western Europeans painted it, and what kind of fruit did they see? They saw apples, so they just said it's an apple. They don't have apple trees in Israel, y'all. It was probably a date or a pomegranate. It was probably a fig. It was probably a fruit that they would recognize. We just think it's apple because we've been culturally assimilated into Western European Christianity, right? That's a little something for you. But it says, don't eat of this fruit. And so when they eat of the fruit, everything was good, but they attained the knowledge of good and so suddenly, there was fraction between people. Distance was made. And they saw things to be about power, empire, control, and now we create a distance. And in that, God ejected them from the garden. There became distance between them and God and creation and all that God had made. And so things were broken. That which was made to be good was broken. And then we heard in the Easter story, on the great sermon that Pastor Doug preached on Easter, the story of a new creation, of a man who took death, the very symbol of chaos and the end of all things, and restored it into a new way, one that would be called the light of the world. And this one comes out of the tomb, and something is so different about this one that comes out of the tomb that even his own friends don't recognize him. He's a new creation. Something is new in him. And so his good friend Mary is there, again, in the garden. Ish and Isha, Adam, Adama, woman and man together in the garden. And she doesn't even recognize him. And she says, please, she thinks he's the gardener. And says, well, please show me where you've laid my friend. I need to know. And I love that all that Jesus does is say her name. He just says, Mary. And she's like, Rabboni! It's you, teacher, where have you been? And she goes to hug him, and he says, no. It's not time for that. You can't hold on to me because you have things to do. You have work to do. You can't stay here. You've got a place to be and work to do in the world. And you are going to be invited to be a part of it because while I am risen, the whole creation, everything is being made new now. So in this, we see this end of that separation between God and us, and we begin to restore those relationships. And then finally, we come to the Revelation story, where it says, and behold, there was a new heaven and a new earth. And it says, all the sea was passed away. All the sea was gone. Remember, it was all about chaos and despair? And the sea is gone. And it says, and then out of the sky comes like a bride, a city adorned like a bride, so that God and humanity would dwell together and would be one and whole together again. It's this vision, this metaphorical, beautiful vision, this beautiful myth about how the way the world is supposed to live and function and act together. It's this gorgeous vision of how the world is supposed to be. And I love it says, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega. And the idea of there's this big cycle. In the Greek alphabet, they've got tablets where they wrote the alphabet, but it's not written like a line like we think it. It's a big circle that goes in a circle, and the Alpha and the Omega share the same spot. That it's the beginning and the end. It's the circle. It's the cycle of all things. And it's the bringing together of us as a new humanity brought into life, into relationship with God again, so that we get to participate in the very life that God is creating. That we get to be a part of this whole story of creation and fall and restoration and recreation. That we get to be the creative images of God acting and being in the world. You have been born with the fingerprints of God on you. Creative beings called to love and live and serve in a world that is desperate to hear that there's a new way to be, that we don't have to live under the same laws, the same rules. We can live as new kinds of people in the world, and the world is desperate to hear it. And just as God has been creative and bringing life out of chaos, we are invited into the same. Just as my beautiful Lego creation was destroyed, it became a repair of a relationship. And we got to work together in making those things together. Now I get it. There is a lot of chaos out there right now, wouldn't you say? There's a lot of that swirling, whirling waters. And sometimes it can be just frankly overwhelming. It can be just a little bit much. Right now, I'm with you. I'm so with you. This chaos is really trying to draw our attention to it. And I heard someone say to me this week, you know, I typically glance at beauty, but I stare at the dark. And I wish I could change that around. That I could glance at the dark and instead stare at beauty and see the good that's happening in the world. The way I like to think of it is, yes, there is chaos. Yes, there is creation, just as there was in the beginning of the story. It wasn't that there was an absence of chaos. It wasn't like in the story here that there was an absence of death. It wasn't like that things were normal and things were okay, but somehow God is able to walk out of chaos and create something beautiful. God has the gorgeous ability of taking messes and turning them into miracles, of tearing down the Lego set and restoring relationships, of seeing the old things get passed away so that new things can come to place. I see the chaos as not in opposition to the world, but an invitation for you and I. An invitation that we can step into this and say, if God can step into chaos and bring light, bring goodness out, well, then so will I. If God can take death, can take the worst things, if God can take that and turn it into resurrection and resurrection life, then so will I. You see, it's not on accident we're saying Christ is risen, I am risen, we are risen, because when we gather as Easter people, it's not to memorialize what happened 2,000 years ago. It's to live into the reality that you and I are living today as resurrected people. And that we have the gift of today dying to the old ways and rising to new ways, to being the kind of people that God is calling us to be in the world. We have the creative gifts and power to lift our heads up above the chaos and say, let there be light. We have that gift in us today to be resurrected. I don't think it's pleasant that we say, I am risen. It is a declaration to the universe that there will be another way than the way of chaos, pain, death, and despair. Are you with me? Are you with me? So, my friends, the whole universe is singing praises to God. And it's our walk to say, so will I. The whole universe is groaning under the pain of injustice and is calling us to go. And God has gone before us. And if God is going there, then so will I. It is our place to see where there's hurt and pain and to go there. And if Jesus can turn death into life, messes into miracles, from a broken down Lego set into a new creation, well, then so will I. May you be resurrected with Christ today. May you speak into the universe. So will I. If you'll pray with me. Lord God, you have called your servants to ventures of which we cannot see the ending, on paths as yet untrodden, through perils unknown. But give us faith to go out in good courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us and your love supporting us. In the name of love, whose name is Jesus. Amen.